Get away from people. In the outside world, turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. Enter my darkness. Fear awaits you. Story 1. On Halloween night, in a small village surrounded by dense forests, the atmosphere was thick with mystery and fear. The villagers were busy preparing for Halloween, decorating their homes with lights and fake ghosts. But behind those decorations lay an old, terrifying story, one that no one dared to speak about openly. 100 years ago, the village was home to a wicked witch named Mara. Mara lived in an old hut at the edge of the forest, isolated from the villagers. No one dared approach her because of the rumors surrounding her. Some said she would steal the souls of children on Halloween and trap them in wax statues to remain immortal. One dark night, a group of curious children decided to sneak into Mara's hut to find out the truth. Everything was dark, and the wind howled ominously. When they reached the hut, they found the door open, as if Mara had been expecting them. They entered cautiously. The air inside was heavy, filled with the scent of burning wax. In the middle of the large room was a table filled with wax statues that seemed to be staring at them with dead eyes. As they explored the place, they heard slow, heavy footsteps approaching the room. The sound grew louder until Mara appeared before them, her eyes glowing with a strange light, and a terrifying smile stretched across her lips. They had no chance to escape. As soon as she raised her hand, they froze in their tracks. Mara was preparing to carry out her horrific ritual. But before she could claim their souls, the lights suddenly went out, and they heard a strange sound echoing around the room. The wax statues began to melt slowly, and the trapped souls of the children were released and attacked Mara. The air was filled with screams, and the hut shook under the weight of the vengeful spirits. The children couldn't move or even scream as they witnessed something beyond the natural world. In the end, the earth swallowed Mara, and her hut disappeared in the blink of an eye. When the children returned to the village, no one believed them. But they knew well that Halloween was no longer just a celebration. It was a night when evil returned to claim its victims. Since then, whenever Halloween approaches, the villagers warn their children to stay away from the forest. They say Mara wasn't completely defeated and that her spirit still roams in the darkness, waiting for the right time to return. Story 2. On a cold Halloween night, Elias, a reckless young man, didn't believe in superstitions. He thought all the stories about ghosts and spirits were just myths to scare children. In his small village, there was a terrifying rumor about an abandoned house on the edge of the forest known as the House of Shadows. This house was old and decaying, with a story about a family that mysteriously vanished inside it decades ago. Since then, no one dared to go near it. On Halloween night, Elias decided to challenge himself and prove his friends, who always warned him about the house, wrong. He confidently told them, "I'm going to the House of Shadows tonight, and I'll stay there for an hour to show you that nothing happens." His friends tried to stop him, but his determination was strong, and he went alone. As he approached the house, the wind howled through the dry leaves, and the darkness wrapped around the place like a cloak of fear. From a distance, the house looked like a black mass hiding old secrets. There was a broken window on the upper floor, with the pale moonlight reflecting off its shattered glass. Elias opened the wooden door with difficulty, its creaking sound piercing the silence. As soon as he entered, a strange coldness crept over his body. The walls were covered in dust, the furniture broken, as if time had stopped inside this house. While exploring the place, he heard a faint sound coming from the upper floor, a sound like whispering. Driven by curiosity, he carefully climbed the creaky wooden stairs, each step producing a loud sound. When he reached the upper floor, he found himself in a long, dark hallway. At the end of the hall was a room with a half-open door. He slowly walked toward it, and when he entered, he found something he wasn't expecting. The room was filled with moving shadows. There was no one there, but the shadows moved unnaturally on the walls, as if they were living beings watching him. Before he could grasp what was happening, a clear voice whispered, "You have returned." He froze in place, his eyes widening with fear. The shadows began to gather in the corner of the room, forming the figure of an old, distorted face staring at him with hollow eyes. The voice spoke again. "You are here to take my place. This is the end." Elias couldn't move, as if a mysterious force was holding him in place. The distorted shadow slowly approached him, and with each step, Elias felt a coldness penetrating his bones. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. In the last moment, just as the shadow was about to consume him, they heard the front door of the house burst open. His friends, worried after he had been gone too long, had followed him into the house. As soon as they entered, the shadows disappeared, along with the terrifying entity. They found Elias lying on the floor, unconscious. They carried him outside, and when he awoke, his eyes were filled with terror. Since that night, Elias never spoke of the House of Shadows again, but deep in his heart, he knew there was something evil residing in that place, waiting for its next victim every Halloween night. Story 3. In one of the old city suburbs, there was an abandoned hospital called Twilight Asylum, known among the locals to be haunted. The hospital was built in the early 20th century and was famous for treating psychiatric patients. However, it was suddenly shut down in the 1950s after a mysterious incident. It was said that the hospital's basement was the scene of secret medical experiments where patients were subjected to inhumane torture. On Halloween night, 4 adventurous friends, Kareem, Sofian, Layla, and Marwa, decided to explore the hospital. They had heard the terrifying stories about the place, but they believed they were just legends and planned to spend the night there to prove the rumors wrong. As they approached the rusty gates of the hospital, they felt an odd chill in the air, despite the night being calm. The building's windows were shattered, and the doors stood ajar as if waiting for them. Kareem turned on his flashlight and said with a smirk, "Let's go in and see the ghosts everyone is afraid of." They entered quietly, the smell of mold and dust filling the place. The walls were cracked, and the floorboards creaked with each step. They explored the floors one by one, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Everything was eerily quiet until they reached the basement, where the lighting was dim and the atmosphere was heavy. Suddenly, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming from the end of the corridor. Everyone stopped speaking and exchanged uneasy glances. Sofian asked, "Did you hear that?" No one wanted to answer, but they had all heard it. They cautiously approached the end of the corridor. There they found an old metal door leading to an old operating room. Kareem carefully pushed the door open, and inside, they found the room completely dark, except for an old operating table in the center. What frightened them the most was the set of old surgical tools on the table, stained with blood, as if they had been used recently. As they tried to back out, Kareem's flashlight suddenly went out, plunging them into total darkness. There was a moment of terrifying silence before they heard soft whispers coming from every direction. The walls began to shake, and the surgical tools slowly started to move on their own. Suddenly, strange shadows started swirling around them quickly, as if they were being surrounded. They began to feel cold breaths on their faces, and the room was filled with unexplainable noises. Layla tried to scream, but her voice was muffled, as if the air around them had frozen. At that moment, the faint lights in the corridor flickered, and a figure appeared wearing an old doctor's coat, his face grotesquely deformed and his eyes bulging, holding a scalpel in his hand. He slowly approached them, his gaze fixed on them. In a deep, eerie voice, he said, "You are next." They ran towards the door, trying to escape, but the closer they got, the more it felt like their feet were stuck to the ground, as if they were being dragged toward the shadowy figure. Before they could escape, they heard Marwa scream. When they turned, she had vanished into the darkness, as if the ground had swallowed her. In the end, the 3 remaining friends managed to escape, but they left the hospital utterly traumatized, unable to explain what had happened inside. Marwa was never found, and from that day, none of them dared to go near Twilight Asylum again. They say that Marwa's spirit still wanders the halls, searching for a way out, but those who enter may never leave themselves.